Well, hi everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Feeling Smarter. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Tim Miller. G'day, Tim. How are you?
I'm going very well, Aaron. How are you going today?
Not too bad. Well, we are post-conference, and our attention is now rapidly turning to our upcoming SMSF days. But we thought we'd take the opportunity to finish off, I guess, our SMSF Association sessions. We had a range of questions in both of our sessions, and today you're going to fire a few at me.
Yeah, so I guess what I wanted to do firstly is you did a session which was titled "Optimising the SMSF Journey," and I thought perhaps you could just give me a bit of a brief sort of rundown as to what that concept entailed before we jump into a couple of the questions that were asked of you.
Yeah, so ultimately, we've seen a fairly significant number of changes over the last few years when it comes to establishing SMSF. So we think about with corporate trustees, we've got our director identification rules. We have seen the introduction of the ability to execute documents in both electronic form to complement that in wet ink. We've seen SuperStream and a whole range of other things. So my job was to help unpack a lot of those issues and then repackage them in essence into the new way in which we need to be dealing with the establishments of self-managed super funds, the way in which we might be making changes within a fund. And I guess finally, I looked at some of the issues that go deeper than, I guess, the face value of Section 17A with members and trustees, in particular, where we have much later in life, we've got those that may lose capacity or where we might have aggrieved parties. And therefore, how do we deal with members looking to exit the fund and how they can influence decision-making in the fund?
Yeah, really good. And look, and so that's actually a pretty good segue into the first question that was sort of thrown at you in the conference, and that is that if a member has ceased to be a member of a self-managed super fund and a director of the trustee company, but a member balance sort of still remains, where does this sit? Is this a breach of 17A?
Yeah, well, ultimately, membership is linked to actually having a balance in the fund. So
Yep.
you can't literally remove yourself as a member but still have a balance there. And therefore, absolutely, we've got to be going to our definition of 17A, but we also need to be very cognizant of what the deed says. And quite clearly, we look at something like the Smarter SMSF deed. You are a member because you have a balance.
Yep.
You can actually be a member without a balance, and again, these are some really good examples of, well, when does a member actually cease to be a member?
Yeah.
It may automatically occur in the event that they no longer have a balance. One of the things we have in our Smarter SMSF deed is that they could therefore cease upon that, but it would be there needs to be a trustee decision that would actually have to occur. So knowing the nuances of what the deed prescribes, but then also flowing on to that, if we look at this question more generally, you just because they want to be removed as a member and potentially as a trustee, they're still subject to these 17A rules because they actually have a balance in the fund.
Yeah, and I guess that's one of like everything else, communication is the key because a lot of people would think that just writing the letter of resignation is enough and that it's done and dusted, but ultimately that's not the case.
Yeah, and the other
And of
one,
course,
Tim, there, just to add to that, is with cessation of membership, and I did talk about this in the session as well, whereby understand, again, yes, they might be removed as a director, yes, they might cease as a member, but what happens to the shareholding in that corporate trustee as well? So one of the things we've got in our Smarter SMSF deed is when someone actually ceases as a member, we then have forfeiture of the share in that constitution. So again, these are important things, especially when you get to blended families or you're looking at some of the greater succession issues as people get older in life, and making sure you understand what the deed says, linking the deed and the constitution, crucially important as well.
yeah, very good. Very good. Which, and the next sort of question I wanted to sort of throw at you, which I guess comes at things from a slightly different angle, and that is, what your options are if you've got effectively non-cooperative trustees. So you've got someone who wants to roll out and they're not getting any or getting the appropriate assistance to be removed from the fund. And I guess the flip side of that is if you're trying to remove someone who you don't want to remain in the fund, are there ways and means of dealing in these sorts of situations?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. And again, there was a couple of things I touched on in the conference there around the fact that you need to look beyond the surface of our 7 and 8 definition, as I said. So control inside this fund and company is in essence going to be dictated by whatever decision-making powers sit inside those relevant documents. So if you have 3 members inside a fund and they're all directors, well, 2 could potentially gang up against 1 on the basis that there is equal voting and equal decision-making based on shareholding. Conversely, we could have a situation where 1 might still be able to outvote the 2 because we have dollars of account balance that dictate things. And this again goes back to the importance of lining up the constitution with the SMSF deed, because too often I see updates get made to the deed and it might be through changes of providers. And then the way in which the rules are written in the deed differ very, very starkly from the decision-making powers inside the constitution. And therefore what you think you want to have occur over this side can't actually occur because you actually haven't, you've got a constitution that might be 5, 10, 15, 20 years or more, and therefore outdated in the context of what needs to occur. So really understanding those nuances, because we still have portability rules that, the member doesn't have to leave in essence if they're a member, unless there are conditions that are imposed on that individual coming into the fund in the first place. And there is an opportunity to potentially create classes of membership, and you could stipulate conditions on that, but it would be very rare to see those things occur. So you have to go back to decision making. And in the case study that I spoke about at the conference, ultimately you're probably going to be guided by a court decision here. And part of that negotiation would have been that, I want this member removed from the fund as part of the decision of the family law court, rather than trying to sort of navigate your way through, with 1 or 2 members that you're in conflict with.
Right. Look, that's a fair amount that you've just covered off on there, and look, I think it's prompting me to go back and watch your session because there's a fair bit to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we should say that some of this information we're naturally going to be looking at in our final session on the SMSF day. So the issues of paying benefits when we think of incapacity, and a lot of the structural setup is becoming crucially important. We've got clients that have been self-managed super fund members for a decade, 2 decades, even more. If we go back to, it's scary to think that 99 SMSFs existed and we're now in 2024. So, tidying these things up, if we haven't already, checking out what needs to be done so that we streamline the succession that needs to occur in the SMSF is absolutely crucial. And again, we'll explore some of that with our Little Brewers Super Fund at our upcoming SMSF days.
Can't wait to do it.
Excellent. Well, thank you once again for joining us this week. Have a great rest of the week. Bye for now.
See you all. Bye-bye.